Hello, hello. This is Prof. Shees, and this video is going to be about reflective practice. So as a teacher, it's important that we reflect on our practice, that we get feedback or critically evaluate ourselves. It can be vulnerable to get feedback or to admit we make mistakes, but ultimately admitting mistakes and assessing ourselves improves our teaching and makes us better teachers. So in this video or this slide, we're going to look at some ways you could get feedback or reflect. You could keep a journal. So after a lesson or at the end of the week, you could document what happened and how it went to help inform future you of how to make changes or how to improve. You can complete a self-assessment. You can record yourself teaching and watch it. Or there's sometimes forms online that help us evaluate ourselves and make sure we're holding ourselves to certain standards. You could keep track with a report or review of student performance. So you can measure to see, are students improving, and is that because of your teaching? You could pursue research, so you could read articles, attend conferences, or even initiate your own study to test new theory or new philosophy, making sure you're up to date. You could collaborate with others, you could co-teach, or you could host a lesson planning or grading day together to make sure that you are comparing and collaborating. You can complete a peer observation, so someone comes in and observes you teaching and gives you feedback. That way you can gain their perspective or other ways of knowing. And lastly, student evaluations. You could ask students for feedback or request anonymous feedback after a unit or a test or activity or even the end of the course to see how students receive or reflect on your teaching. For our class, we're going to focus a lot on journaling. So documenting every week what we did and how it went. To help expand our reflection, here are 10 questions to ask yourself. The first is, what was your best moment today? And how can you have more moments like these? So if something went really well, what caused it and how can you recreate that? 2, did you build on content, product, or process from previous lessons? So making sure we're engaging in a very intentional practice, that we are building towards a greater picture. 3, what was my most challenging moment today? How can you better prepare yourself for next time? So maybe there was an issue of classroom management, timing, technology, or an activity. This will help us brainstorm ways to improve. 4, what can you do differently, or what would you do differently? So based on how that lesson was received or went, you can identify some changes, accommodations, or adaptations. 5, did your actions reflect what you've learned in class or from literature or research? So are you using theory? Can you justify your decisions? 6, were my students engaged while I was teaching, and how did you know? 7, were my students excited? And if not, how can you change that? 8, how did I support my colleagues? Did you collaborate, co-teach, get feedback? 9, what additional assistance or supports would have helped your lesson? So what do you need to learn or access to be a better teacher? And lastly, did this activity teach you something about teaching? So after the lesson, do you have a better understanding of who you are as a teacher and what you value? So I hope with these questions that you can help expand or build your reflection journal or reflective journal to be more critical of yourself and identify these areas for improvement. In addition to having a journal, I mentioned that you could collaborate, such as a self-evaluation or peer evaluation. If that's something that interests you, I want to recommend WIDA, pages 249 to 250. They have this lovely chart and feedback guide. It's actually part of a section about how to collaborate with another instructor, but I particularly like this table or this chart as it outlines things we can hold ourselves to or kind of help evaluate ourselves, making sure we're following these recommended best practices.